Hi guys, my name's Seb Tudor, I'm the man on the Silver Mountain and welcome back. Now today I want to talk about proportional representation. Now quick thing, first off, it's still the 9th today, it's still just before lunch or just around lunchtime, and so as a result, whilst you guys are watching this and to me right now, the future, and you know everything that's happening and has happened over the last week or so whilst the kind of first fallout from the election has been going on. I don't, and so when I'm talking about the numbers and talking about the things and talking about the ways that these things could work, I have no knowledge of what's been going on. So just that. But I want, as I said, proportional representation is what I want to talk about. I feel after looking at the numbers from this most recent election, it's again incredibly important to get this in at some point, and I have continued to argue this point. I have continued to vote in favour of this point for all of my adult life since I've been able to vote. But again, granted, it does. I'm joining in the chorus here, where it only comes up at elections when people get upset, but I also tend to talk about it with friends outside of that whenever politics comes up. And so I want to bring this up again now so that we've got some relevant information that's new, that's fresh, that to me only came out like last night. There's actually one constituency still missing from these numbers because one seat has still not been declared at the time that I took a look a second ago to pull this screenshot off for you guys. But as a result, I want to get into this, and so as I said, proportional representation, what it is ultimately that you would have an even fair system for voting, which would mostly revolve around the fact that it would be one person, one vote, every constituency, every kind of voting area, voting district would be the same number of people, and so as a result, you're having that kind of very direct one-to-one kind of representation almost in regards to this area of this number of people with this number of people in it has chosen this person to represent them, and so then they are doing whatever, and so as a result you're not getting large constituencies that have had their districts drawn around very specifically, say, conservative areas, as they were the last people to do this. Then they're going to get that big swell of conservative support because it's a larger district with more conservatives in, and they're going to dominate because of that, rather than having it be a fair distribution just based on everyone in this particular area adds up to, say, pick an arbitrary figure, 1 million people. There are 64.1 million people, in which case we can also downsize government and save ourselves some money and improve accountability and improve representation by having more people on the ground, providing more jobs as a part of support structure up to those MPs. There you go, we've got that. Or even if you increase that so that we had, 128, so it was every 500,000 people, had an MP. That's still like cutting down our current parliamentary size, which is 650, substantially. Brings it right the way down. That's helpful. That's good, right? And so let's actually take a look at these figures. Now we've got the party names there. We've got the number of seats that they achieved of the 650. We've got the changes relative to relative to what they held before. We've got the votes and the share and change percentages. Now the numbers we are most interested in looking at are the seats, but most specifically these here, the number of votes that were actually cast in favour of each party. Now with these, this is where we're going to stop and take a look, right? Because first off, I want to point out where the disparities are in the current system, because the current system is appalling. And so first off, we've got the Conservatives and Labour, and they've scored essentially, or they've achieved votes within that's about 800,000 people difference, and yet you've got a reasonably sizable gap between the two. But then you start to see the problem when you actually look at some of the others. Some of the smaller the numbers, the more pronounced the differences are. And so you take a look, and you've got the Scottish Nationalist Party there, who achieved about 1 million people, but got 35 seats, right? But then you've got the Lib Dems, who got over 2 million people, and yet only got 12. And so you're looking at this and you're going, okay, well, that seems odd, right? And then, especially when you then look also at the fact that the Labour got 12 to 13 million, and you've got 2.3 million there for the Lib Dems. You would, that's somewhere in the region of about kind of a sixth of the Labour number, and so you would expect maybe they would have a sixth of in relative terms the number of seats, but no, that's not the case. The Democratic Unionist Party, though, only achieved about just under 300,000 votes on their behalf, and yet they almost equal the Lib Dems when the Lib Dems again achieved many, many more seats. Now, the idea of I can't really go through these numbers in full and convert them to kind of how many seats there would be under proportional representation, because I would need to go through and also look at the distribution of these votes, where these votes were, and try and do that. And considering that information isn't even out yet when I'm recording this in full, then that would be a very difficult task for me to do. But what we can do is we can just go, okay, so we've got this change in government, so we've lowered the number of seats. Let's say that each person here is looking at 500,000 people each MP, 500,000 people, 128 MPs in Parliament. And so you look at this and you go, right, so just from the figures we've got here, ignoring distribution for the moment, just because that would be a tough task to go through. Let's take a look at these numbers and say how many seats these people would really have. Yeah, so you've got what it would be, maybe 20. It would be like 26, 27 seats for the Conservatives. It would be 25 seats for the for Labour. You'd have maybe a maximum of 2 seats for the Scots. You'd have 4 or so seats for the Lib Dems, and then the rest kind of scales down, where you would actually have, for instance, the UK Independence Party. They would have a seat at least, and whilst I'm no fan of UKIP by any means, the fact that they've actually had people vote for them, they have had they deserve at least some voice, yeah. And so you're looking at this and you're going, okay, so here's where these problems are, yeah. We need to get this system in so that we can actually have our voices heard, instead of, as with the case of, say, the Lib Dems here, who seem to have really lost out just due to their distribution here, really. Those 2.3 million people, a very sizable chunk of what's gone on here, are missing out on having their voices heard in a lot of ways. And so then, though, you're looking at the populations and you're going, okay, so there are about 5.9 million people in Scotland. You've got about 1.8 million people in Northern Ireland. You've got, I believe it's about 3 million people in Wales, and then the rest of the 64.1 million that makes up the UK as a whole is in England. And yet, again, you've got an Irish party here. In fact, between the Irish parties that are stuck there, you've got 17 seats being claimed. When again, you've got 35 seats being claimed by a purely Scottish party as well. And it's like, compared to the Liberal Democrat number, when they have achieved more votes, but purely based on where they are, they've lost out. And so it's a case of kind of redrawing the lines, making sense of it. So if you've got 5 million people in Scotland, 5 to 6 million people in Scotland, then you have 5 to 6 seats, yeah, or 10 to 12 seats if we're going by the 500,000 mark. If you're in Ireland and you've got 1.8 million people, then you've got either 2 seats if you're going a million per district, or if you're going by the 500,000 mark, then you go for four, like 3 to 4 seats, and it's all about just making sure that there's fairness. I mean, I personally, let me get rid of these for a second. I personally feel that if you went a step further and had two separate votes, one for your MP and one for the leader of the country, then that would be so much better as well, because then you would actually have a say in, you could have the kind of party politics around or the kind of politics of personality around the leaders if you wanted to, but also it means that then after the fact, once you've had all the votes in and you've got this potentially quite eclectic mix of people in Parliament who have been put forward from all over the place, because you've got even voting districts and they're all putting forward just a candidate or a couple of candidates or whatever, depending on how exactly you're linking the 500,000 districts, because potentially that could cut cities and things in half. But again, you have all these people being kind of put forward, and they're a more eclectic mix, just because, again, yes, they would be in the example we looked at a second ago, they would still be majority the main two collectives, but instead of it being like a huge majority for one party, so that they only need a handful more so that they can take control, it would be a case of, right, so if we've got 128 MPs in Parliament, and then you've got one of the major parties has 25 seats or so, and the other one of the major parties has just 27 odd, then yeah, okay, they're still very sizable chunks of the parliamentary vote, but they're also not kind of all encompassing. They don't have a full mandate and full control to do what they like. And so then if you voted for a leader separately, that leader would actually have to lead. They'd have to come up with a vision, they'd have to convince people, they'd have to be communicative, they'd have to be helpful. You would have to try and put aside tribalism and this territorial nonsense and this passive aggressive bullshit, and you'd have to work very much more towards the view for the future, the way that the country was functioning, and so on and so forth, because otherwise the electorate wouldn't deal with it. They wouldn't cope with it. Yeah, if those people were failing them the next time it came round, because you've got that split and the kind of waves of kind of the normal zeitgeist of various places around the country, you would see those shifts happen far more. For instance, in the election that we had here, when I took a look, the only reason that the Conservatives won was because we had very strong support for the various more left-wing parties here, and so as a result it split that more left-wing vote and allowed kind of a weakened opposition to the Conservatives, and so they walked away with it, which was a shame, really. But if you had more in the way of proportional representation, that gap probably would have been smaller to one extent or another, because there would have been either more people involved or less people involved. You would have had more of a shift in things. Yeah, and I could be completely wrong on that in regards to the way that it would have worked, but at the same time the system is obviously flawed based on the numbers that we've just looked at, where you've got 2 million people having less of a voice than who have spoken up aggressively, by going out and doing their kind of civic duty to make their opinion heard when it is asked. You're having those people having much less of a voice than kind of less than half as many people who did the same thing. This is the one time where numbers really matter, where the people amassing behind causes really matters, and yet it is devalued by this archaic system that we have that just does not function and is very, very open to corruption as a result of the lefty parties coming in and changing voting lines, changing the district sizes, moving things around, gerrymandering as it's generally referred to, especially in the States. It's a substantial problem, and it's not a problem that's going to go away easily, because the two kind of most authoritative parties within our system in the UK, at any rate, don't want it to happen. I would be very impressed if one of the things that came out of this election or elections into the future were Labour, if they were actually left-leaning, if they were actually genuinely for the many and not for the few, as their slogans continue to kind of roll along. If that was the case, then fine. Jump on with the other parties that are trying to champion proportional representation and get it in, so that everyone who is the few, everyone who is the many rather, actually has their ability to put their point across, and actually have it heard, instead of having it drowned out by the daft system. Yeah. But anyway, tell me what you guys think, because obviously this is a thing that involves everyone. This is a conversation that involves everyone. And so, these voting systems, they're not difficult, they're not hard. It's a really fucking easy thing to do. You can, if I have seen school children organise themselves into equally sized groups, pick a leader, and have that leader step forward to take part in project work or make decisions or whatever. I've seen school children do this, and yet they aren't allowed to vote. I mean, there's even arguments over people who are legally allowed to be their own guardians not being allowed to vote in this country. And so just based purely on the fact that they are young, when the young at the moment are far more kind of open to technology and open to the information that kind of allows them. They are far better educated and presented with far much more information than they ever have been in past generations in various ways. Yes, our education system could do with a tune-up, but also the amount of media consumed by young people these days, it far surpasses anything else, and so it allows for a much greater expansion. And yet I'm getting off topic because I do that. But at the same time, these people are arguing over stuff like that, when you can see working demonstrations of how a fairer system could work in just asking kids to do a thing and them being capable of it. And yet somehow these 40 plus individuals, the majority of them, many of them in fact very, very old, and approaching the ends of their lives in many cases, you've got those people sat there making these decisions and saying that this archaic system is the way that it needs to function and the way that it needs to work. And it's like, no, sorry, this is obviously problematic and obviously wrong, when you can actually look at the numbers and see that people are being shouted down or not getting as much of a say just because of where they are, where they've been put, how lines have been drawn. The fact that Scotland has the capacity to have fewer people vote for a group, and yet they still have then more of a say after the fact. It's a madness. It really is, and it's a big problem and leads to further corruption as well with the way that it stands. But anyway, we'll have to see how it goes. I'm going to continue talking about this to people, so I'd love to hear what you guys think. But anyway, guys, I hope you found this interesting. I hope you found looking at the numbers kind of useful, maybe to inform kind of your thinking on this and how things have moved forward after the end of today for me and for you last week. But otherwise, thank you very much, guys, and I'll see you in the video tomorrow. Take care. Thank you very much for watching, guys. If you found this at all interesting, then please drop us a like and subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the video tomorrow. Take care.